On November 17, 1993, General Sani Abacha, a seasoned military officer and former defense minister, seized power in a bloodless coup from the interim national government led by Ernest Shonekan and became the Nigeria's head of state. This is the story of General Sani Abacha, the Nigerian military leader who ruled the nation with fear from 1993 to 1998. Some people say he is the most corrupt leader who has ever ruled Nigeria. Others say he is one of the most feared leaders in Africa. Let's go back in time and learn about his rise to power, his government, and how he left an unforgettable mark on Nigeria's history. General Sani Abacha rose through the ranks in the Nigerian military and by 1983 had achieved the rank of brigadier when he assisted General Ibrahim Babangida in overthrowing Shehu Shagari, the then Nigerian president who had been elected to his second presidential term. On December 31, 1983, Major General Muhammadu Buhari became Nigeria's head of state after a military coup that ended the country's brief experiment with civilian rule. Buhari's government focused on fighting corruption and restoring order, but was also marked by strict authoritarian measures and human rights abuses. Just 2 years later, in August 1985, General Ibrahim Babangida overthrew Buhari in another palace coup and became the new head of state. He then appointed Sani Abacha as his second in command. Under Babangida's rule, Nigeria faced significant economic challenges. He introduced structural adjustment programs to stabilize the economy. But these policies led to widespread hardship, including rising unemployment and inflation. General Ibrahim Babangida promised to return Nigeria to civilian rule, and as part of the transition program, all political parties including the NPN, the UPN, the NPP and the PRP were banned. He then went on to form two new parties, which are Social Democratic Party (SDP) and the National Republican Convention (NRC), and all politicians were told to join one of these two parties. In August and September 1992, the two parties held their presidential primaries, but these primary elections were cancelled by Babangida, citing electoral fraud. The candidates who participated in these primaries were banned from contesting again, and this included prominent figures such as Alhaji Shehu Musa Yar'Adua and Adamu Siroma. During this period, Babangida reorganized the military government by replacing the Armed Forces Ruling Council with the National Defense and Security Council. He also established a civilian transitional council led by Chief Ernest Shonekan to handle administrative and economic matters. The nomination process for presidential candidates, supervised by National Electoral Commission (NEC), used an open ballot system called Option A4. This process produced Bashir Tofa, a businessman from the north, as the presidential candidate for National Republican Convention (NRC), and MKO Abiola, a media mogul from the south, as the presidential candidate for the Social Democratic Party (SDP). There was a perception that both candidates had close ties to the military, and therefore their election would not disfavor the military even in a civilian rule. In the Second Republic, both presidential candidates were involved with the ruling party, the National Party of Nigeria, one of the parties banned by the Babangida government. Abiola had failed to secure the nomination of the NPN for the 1983 presidential elections against Shehu Shagari, the incumbent president of the country at that time. He had only been part of the SDP for a month when he gained the presidential ticket. Though Abiola was widely known throughout the country, Tofa was relatively unknown except in his home state of Kano. Abiola based his campaign mainly on fixing the economy. He strongly spoke out against the government's Structural Adjustment Program (SAP), which had started in 1986 under Babangida's leadership. The program followed advice from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank. It included cutting down on government spending to better control the country's money.
By turning over future investment to the private sector and by removing the complex structures which makes NMPC's accountability and assessment of efficiency almost impossible. You see, there are so many layers upon layers built on this simple thing, crude oil. You don't even know whether it's oil or some mystery around it that is taking the money from the central bank. You see, I think we would demystify all these things. In my government, the daily export of crude will be published. and the price at which it is sold.
On the other hand, Tofa and his party supported the SAP. Tofa didn't speak out as much against the government. Instead, his campaign focused on making sure policies were properly carried out. Many people believed he was closer to Babangida and the military ruler. At one point, he even suggested that Babangida should stay in power until the year 2000. June 12, 1993, the day of the presidential election was filled with hope as Nigerians from all parts of the country came out to vote, believing real change was possible. For the first time in years, the people had a chance to choose their leader in what many saw as a free and fair election. Only about 35% of voters came out to vote, and even though there were some political and administrative issues, there was no serious violence. On June 14, the electoral body, NEC, started announcing the result. Abiola was leading. He won in 19 out of the 30 states, including the Federal Capital Territory. He won all the states in the southwest, won 3 out of the 7 in the southeast, 5 out of 9 in the north, including Kano, which was Tofa's home state, and 4 of the 7 states in the middle belt. Out of 6.6 million votes counted, Abiola had 4.3 million, while Tofa had 2.3 million. MKO Abiola had gained support from all parts of the country, crossing ethnic and religious boundaries. The final result of the election was leaked on June 18 by pro-democracy activists who broke the law to let the public know the truth. Their leak showed that Abiola had clearly won, getting about 58% of the vote. But just a few days later, on June 24, General Ibrahim Babangida announced the annulment of the election.
It is true that the presidential election was generally seen to be free, fair, and peaceful. However, there was in fact a huge array of electoral practices virtually in all the states of the Federation before the actual voting began.
Before the election even took place, there were already rumors that the military didn't feel comfortable with Abiola becoming president and that they wouldn't accept the outcome if he won. After the election was cancelled, there were violent protests in July, especially in the southwest where many people supported Abiola. The situation got very tense, and it is believed that security forces killed over 100 people while trying to stop the riots. The international community strongly criticized the annulment. Countries like the United Kingdom, the United States, and the members of the European United stopped giving aid to Nigeria, while the Commonwealth also condemned the government's actions. But the military government pushed back, accusing these countries of interfering and trying to cause trouble in Nigeria. Even former military leaders, including General Olusegun Obasanjo, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, and 10 other retired generals, came together under a group called Association for Democracy and Good Governance. They released a joint statement calling for Babangida to step down from power. After the election was cancelled, the government started cracking down on the media. Several newspapers and TV stations were shut down, and many journalists were arrested. In early August, Abiola traveled to London and Washington to get international support for his presidency. He came back to Nigeria on September 24, 1993. Meanwhile, protests continued in the southwest. Banks and businesses were forced to close as riots spread. With pressure from top military officials to keep his promise of handing over power, Babangida resigned on August 25, 1993. An interim national government was then set up, with Ernest Shonekon as the head and Sani Abacha, Babangida's close ally, as defense master. Shonekon announced that a new election would be held in February 1994, but his government was weak, so he was in charge. It wasn't clear if he had full control of the military. At the same time, Nigeria's economy was in bad shape. Inflation was rising, the naira was losing value, and the country was ranked as one of the world's poorest. To try and fix this, Shonekon reopened talks with the IMF and the World Bank and made the unpopular decision to remove fuel subsidies, causing fuel prices to rise by 700%. In response, the Nigeria Labour Congress went on strike. On November 17, 1993, Sani Abacha took over in a palace coup. He removed the interim government, dissolved the national and state government, and replaced all elected governors with military and police officers.
The interim national government is hereby dissolved. The national and state assemblies are also dissolved. The state executive councils are dissolved. The brigade commanders are to take over from the governors in their states until administrators are appointed. All local governments stand dissolved. The directors of personnel are to take over the administration of the local governments until administrators are appointed. The National Electoral Commission is hereby dissolved. The two political parties are hereby dissolved. All processions, political meetings, and associations of any type in any part of the country are hereby banned. Any consultative committee, by whatever name called, is hereby proscribed.
In June 1994, Abiola declared himself the rightful president and commander-in-chief. For that, he was arrested and charged with treason. His arrest led to massive protests and strike by oil workers, bankers, and university staff. The strike by oil workers brought the economy to a standstill. In response, the government arrested union leaders and removed some civilian members from the cabinet. As the month passed under General Sani Abacha's rule, the atmosphere in Nigeria grew darker. People were afraid to speak freely, and anyone who criticized the government risked being arrested, or even worse. Abacha wasn't just ruling with an iron fist, he was crushing anything that looked like an opposition to his government. Political leaders, human rights activists, journalists, and pro-democracy campaigners were hunted down, detained without trial, or forced into hiding. Secret police and soldiers raided homes, shut down newspapers, bombed TV stations. Fear arises among the people in the country. One of the loudest voices speaking out then was Ken Saro-Wiwa, a writer and environmental activist from the Niger Delta. Saro-Wiwa's involvement was deeply personal and connected to the suffering of his people, the Ogoni. Since the late 1950s, multinational oil companies, especially Shell, had been extracting oil from Ogoni land. While the oil brought enormous wealth to Nigeria, the Ogoni people saw little benefit. Instead, they experienced severe environmental damage, rivers and farmlands were polluted, health problems increased, and their traditional way of life was threatened. In 1990, Saro-Wiwa helped fund the movement of the survival of Ogoni people, MUSOP. The group demanded environmental justice, fair distribution of oil revenues, and respect for Ogoni rights. MUSOP formed Ogoni Bills of Rights, outlined their demands for political autonomy and an end to environmental damage. Saro-Wiwa spent years fighting for the right of the Ogoni people, whose land had been damaged by oil spills from multinational oil companies. He demanded justice, cleanup, and fair treatment for his people, but his activism made him a target. In 1999, Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni activists, known as the Ogoni Nine, were arrested and accused of being behind the murder of 4 traditional chiefs.
There is no possibility whatsoever that I or MUSOP would ever have planned any such action, and I will forever disavow it, no matter what any forum decides upon. I appeal to you, my Lord, for only one thing. The Ogoni people have suffered tremendously in this country. They have made a tremendous contribution to this country. Niger Delta itself is in serious trouble. We need every assistance that we can get.
The trial was rushed and heavily criticized. Witnesses later admitted they were bribed to testify against him. Despite worldwide pleas to stop the verdict, Abacha ordered their execution by hanging. On November 10, 1995, Ken Saro-Wiwa, along with Baren Kobe, John Kweme, Saturday Dobi, Paul Levera, Nodu Heo, Felix Nwate, Daniel Gboko, Baribo Bera, who formulated the Ogoni Nine, were hanged to death. The news sent shockwaves around the world. Protests erupted in many countries. Human rights groups, world leaders, and organizations like the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and the Commonwealth of Nations condemned the act. The punishment didn't stop there. Nigeria was suspended from the Commonwealth. Western countries imposed sanctions, stopping military cooperation, reducing diplomatic ties, and halting some aid. Multinational companies faced pressure to cut business ties with Nigeria. In 1996, General Sani Abacha ordered the arrest and detention of Alex Ibru, the publisher of the Guardian newspaper. His paper was known for its bold and uncompromising reporting, exposing corruption and human rights abuses despite the growing dangers. That year, the Abacha regime's intolerance reached a terrifying peak. In a shocking and brutal move, armed men raided Ibu's home in Lagos. He was forcibly taken and held captive in a secret location, subjected to harsh interrogations and intimidation. For weeks, the citizen grew concerned, unsure of his fate. The attack was meant to silence Ibu and send a stern warning to the press: stop speaking out or face deadly consequences. But Ibu refused to be silenced. Even after enduring torture and threats, he remained steadfast. Upon his release, he resumed his role as a leading voice against dictatorship, determined to keep the light of the truth alive. At the same time, Gani Faweyemi, the fearless people's lawyer, was being hunted too. He had a habit of dragging the government to court, challenging their authority, and defending ordinary Nigerians. The Abacha's regime hated it. They arrested him over and over again, harassed him, tried to break him, but Faweyemi kept fighting, becoming a symbol of hope when the country needed it most. Again, the military regime of General Sani Abacha turned its ruthless gaze towards the Nigerian most prominent former leaders, General Obasanjo. Obasanjo, who has once ruled Nigeria as a military head of state from 1976 to 1979 and voluntarily handed power to a civilian government, was widely respected both at home and abroad. Under Abacha's reign, even past presidents were not safe. Abacha claimed that General Obasanjo, Major General Musa Yar'Adua, and several others were planning to overthrow his government. Despite the lack of credible evidence, Obasanjo was arrested, tried in secret, and sentenced to life in prison, which was later reduced to 15-year sentence. Major General Musa Yar'Adua was sentenced to death but was later reduced to life in prison. However, in 1997, Sheikh Musa Yar'Adua died behind the bars under mysterious circumstances, raising serious questions about what happened to him. Even with all this pressure, Abacha still wanted to appear in control, to show the world that he could fix Nigeria's problems. So he launched a new plan called Vision 2010. This was an ambitious plan to transform Nigeria into a modern economy by the year 2010. Abacha promised that the plan would bring job creation, better infrastructure, and a stronger economy. He said that Nigeria would focus on things like industrial development, education, healthcare, and infrastructure improvement. But in reality, the plan was a failure. Abacha's government mishandled funds and corruption continued to bleed Nigeria dry. Instead of creating jobs and improving life for everyday Nigerians, much of the money meant for Vision 2010 was either stolen or misused by the government officials close to Abacha. Even projects that were started under Vision 2010 were often abandoned halfway. It was said that Abacha government stole about $4 to $5 billion. In September 1999, Enrico Mofrini, a Swiss lawyer, was hired to recover the money stolen by Abacha. He said an initial investigation published by the Nigerian police in November 1998 found that more than $1.5 billion was stolen by Abacha and his associates. One of the ways they gathered such a huge amount of money was especially bold. Abacha would tell an advisor to make a request to him for money for a vague security issue. He then signed off the request, which the advisor would then take to the central bank, which the advisor would then take most of the money to Abacha's house. This was just one way Abacha and his associates stole huge amount of money. Other methods ranged from awarding contracts to friends at highly inflated prices and then pocketing the differences. In 2008, $508 million was found in Abacha family's many Swiss bank accounts and was sent from Switzerland to Nigeria between 2005 and 2007. By 2018, the amount Switzerland has returned to Nigeria had reached more than $1 billion. In June 2014, a sum of $277 million was returned to Nigeria from Liechtenstein. 6 years later, in May 2020, $308 million held in account based in the Channel Island of Jersey was also returned to Nigeria. About $30 million is still sitting in the UK, yet to be returned, along with $144 million in France and a further $18 million in Jersey. In total, Mr. Mofrini says his work secured the restitution of just more than $2.4 billion. On Monday, June 8, 1998, General Sani Abacha died. Officially, it was claimed he died of a heart attack. Some say it was a sudden illness while receiving guests from India in the presidential villa. The autopsy was conducted, and just like that, Nigeria's most feared dictator was gone. Nigerians poured into the street, not to mourn, but in relief. For a nation that has endured 5 years of fear, silence, and suffocating dictatorship, it felt like the first breath of fresh air. July 7, 1998, exactly 1 month later, another shockwave struck. Chief MK Abiola, the man widely believed to have won the annulled 1993 presidential election, died in custody on the day he was scheduled to be released. He had spent 4 years in solitary confinement under brutal conditions. Abiola slumped and died, allegedly from a heart attack. With Abacha gone, General Abdulsalam Abubakar, the then Chief of Defense Staff, assumed power. Like his predecessor, Abubakar took a surprisingly democratic path. He announced that Nigeria would transition to civilian rule in less than a year. He freed political prisoners, including General Olusegun Obasanjo, who had been sentenced to 15 years in prison under Abacha. He also reached out to civil society, set up an electoral commission, and laid the foundation for Nigeria's Fourth Republic. On May 29, 1999, just 11 months after Abacha's death, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo was sworn in as a democratically elected president, marking the end of military rule in Nigeria. If you made it to this point, I'm really excited to share stories like this with you on this new channel. We will explore the untold histories, culture, powerful moments, and incredible people that have shaped our world. If you would like to see more of this video, kindly hit the subscribe button and join me on this journey. And don't forget to like and share this video if you have learned something today. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to bring you more stories that matter. See you next time.